after some time. And we are great to have you on our online conference about new education. And we are very happy to have your insights about education now, education in the future, and the needs of the today's world and the children. And Paul is the expert on Montessori education, first of all, but that he's an expert on education generally. So we would be very happy to have your thoughts about the educational system and how we can change it in the future to meet the needs of the children, the parents, I would say, and also the employees and the organization people could work in the future, because the goal of the education is finally to create the successful adult, I would say, right? So that we can be finally successful in life. Education is not just for education. Education has also the purpose. So, dear Paul, just to say, Paul is in Beijing now, in China. So where he is implementing Montessori systems in the Chinese schools. So supporting this process. So we are very happy that you find time and be a part of our project here. So let's start, Paul, with the question about what do you think is wrong with the present public standard, I would say, educational system, because many people see that something is wrong, that we do some mistakes, I would say, that the system was created maybe many years ago, but it has not been evolved very much. So what do you think could be improved in the present traditional educational system? What is wrong with this?
Well, first of all, hello everybody, and many thanks for this opportunity to speak to the conference. And as I said, hello, and hello from Beijing, China. And I appreciate your question about what's wrong, but if I could, I really actually would like to begin with what's right and then go from there. And the reason I want to start with what's right is because there are, I don't know the real number, but I can imagine all over the world, millions of teachers and school administrators and people doing research to really help children grow and develop. And I think there are people doing incredible work, particularly now with the worldwide pandemic. The stories of teachers who are going to families' homes to bring something to the children who would have been in their class, or trying to understand and figure out a way to use like this Zoom program to communicate better with children. I just want to pause and really appreciate and acknowledge the heroic work of, and again, I don't know the numbers, so let's just say all over the world, heroic teachers coping and trying to understand the challenges right now of this pandemic and doing amazing dedicated work to help children and even to help families. And that said, it brings to my awareness that perhaps before we can talk about what's wrong about education, we could just for a moment ask the question, what is the purpose of education? And you mentioned the idea that it should ready children for their adult lives. And I would have to agree with that, because after all, children do grow up. But there's an interesting Montessori insight about what this means to become ready for an adult life that we could use to understand what's working or not working in traditional education. And the insight is each one of us is uniquely different. Each one of us will grow and develop in our own unique way and become well, let me pause, and we should become our own special, unique person. Now, the challenge in traditional education, many other people have described it this way. The challenge is it's a model based on a factory. The development and the design of traditional schooling dates back well over 100 years. And at that time, most of the world was transitioning from farming way of life to industrial way of life. So if a machine could be built that could produce identical chairs or identical clothing or any product that we would want to mention, those machines, those factory procedures were designed for efficiency. They were designed for assembling step by step by step by step. So this became a worldwide mentality, the industrial mindset, if you will. And in the industrial mindset, what was valued was performance. And what was valued was achievement. Achievement in terms of how many chairs would be manufactured per some unit of time. And all of that way of thinking rolled right into schools. Now, originally, before the Industrial Revolution, that's not how schools were designed. Schools instead were more family-oriented, family-like. The famous one-room schoolhouse, where children between the ages of whenever they would begin to whenever they would end, all together, all learning in the same way. And then comes this factory model. Now the teacher is the production manager. And each year, children got assembled. When you're 5, you got put together so much, and 6, a little bit more, and 7, and 8, and 9, and so on. Now, in the factory, they needed to test the machines to make sure the efficiency was really, really good. And they use words like tolerance, or they use words like standard deviation. Here is the product, and some mistakes might happen, and how far away from that standard ideal was the product. And all of that way of thinking rolled right into traditional schools in the early 1900s. So now we talk, even today, what's called a bell curve. And the bell curve is a distribution of achievement by children of all ages. There's the average, and some students are below, and some students are above. And all of this way of thinking, again, comes from this Industrial Revolution. So the factory and schools became almost cloned. Now, that seemed to work well for everybody, because if the parents are going to work every day in a factory, why not have the children do the same thing? And so we would think that the schoolhouse, that's now like a factory, and what the parents are doing are somehow the same, and everybody should be okay with that. Well, from the very beginning, it could never be okay. And I think the pandemic now is highlighting some of the reasons why it cannot be okay. And the first thing that comes to mind with what's wrong with schools today is that children are not things. It's one thing to manufacture and mass produce chairs or tables or any other kind of product, but children are not things. And that insight of Dr. Montessori and so many other people over the same period of history is not a surprise. Everybody has always known that children are not things. They're not identical. They learn when they're ready to. They learn at their own speed and pace. And if we push the child to go faster, we run the risk of the child not understanding, becoming frustrated. But if we go too slow, we run the risk of the child being bored and multiple problems.